Did you grow up in a church that had acolytes? You know, the little kids that they grab right before a service and send them down the aisle with a candle lighter. I was one of those kids growing up. And I remember always walking down the aisle so focused on keeping my flame lit that I missed it. I missed the fact that I was the visual representation of the Spirit of God entering into worship. And I remember that the church that I grew up in was adorned with these magnificent stained glass windows. And in between all of these windows were these beautiful banners that were colorful and filled with symbols. But as a kid, I remember thinking that, well, since God created color, He must love a colorful house. So yes, I missed the point of that too. You see, I had no idea, like maybe you didn't either, that worship is in part a visual thing. We enter into worship by what we see. Now, growing up, I'd always thought that worship was just the songs that we sang, but that's not true. Worship is a celebration. It's a celebration of who God is and who we are because of God. But unfortunately, we've lost a lot of this imagery. We've lost a lot of this visual aspect of worship because we've lost liturgy. When people process at the beginning of a liturgical service, carrying the banners, the cross, candles, the Bible, bread and wine and oil, that's not an act of drudgery that takes place before the real worship starts. I mean, it can be if it's not understood. But what it is the visual representation of our story, the salvation story that we have been brought into, that we are celebrating. These elements which are being processed are a visual reminder of the presence of the triune God. He's here. Salvation has come. Let the celebration begin. In 2 Samuel chapter 6, tells the story of the Ark of the Covenant being brought back into the city of Jerusalem, with King David out in front of this procession. David was so excited that the presence of God was entering into his city that he danced before the Lord, the Bible says. He even was so excited he danced down into his underwear. Can you imagine that? In more recent church history, though, we enter into this visual worship with stained glass windows and banners and colors, which helps remind us that this is our story, that we are entering into this salvation story too. Have you ever consulted with an interior decorator? Apart from them being really expensive, they will tell you something that's very useful. They'll tell you that colors set a mood. And that's very true. Colors do set a mood, especially in worship. But unless you know what mood those colors are supposed to be setting, you're going to miss out on such an important part of a worship service. For instance, in a liturgical service, purple represents penitence and royalty and is used at times of the year for preparation, such as Advent and Lent. White and gold represent joyous times of the year, such as Christmas and Easter. But they also represent death and resurrection. Green always represents growth and is used throughout much of the year. And red is the color of fire and always represents the power and the presence of God. So we worship, we celebrate, not just in our words and in our songs, but in the fullness of our senses. We worship that the presence of God is here. And through our symbols and our colors, we represent that we are entering into this salvation story too. So can we be less focused on what we have to do? Like the child acolyte, solely focused on not letting the flame go out. And be more aware of the worship and the story that we are entering into by what we see around us? I hope so, lest we miss out on the full depth of worship.